I've recently found myself in a situation that I imagine a lot of gamers go through at one time or another, and that is the backlog. You know, a bunch of games that you keep telling yourself like, no, that looks cool, I'll definitely try that someday, but when you actually consider sitting down to play it, you think, starting a new game is like a whole hassle. I'm just gonna play 3 houses for the 42nd consecutive time. Well, sometimes you just gotta give yourself that kick in the butt and say, no more! New experiences are a unique and exciting thing, something that you can only get once in a lifetime. So I knuckled down and finally played a game I've been saving for a rainy day for the past 15 years, Xenogears. Now, the Xeno series as a whole is something I have absolutely no experience with. I pretty much just know about it through reputation alone. And as for Xenogears itself, I didn't really know anything about it, but whenever the topic of greatest PS1 games ever comes up, Xenogears pops up with relative frequency. And having finally played the game, I can say it was quite a wild ride. Personally, it reminds me a lot of Tales of, in the sense that I feel it has a similar focus. That is to say, strong characters, some amazing world building, and some truly terrible dialogue.
Damn. So they're planning on attacking. Engine room. Activate the emergency sealing system. Engine room. Engine.
But that's kind of par for the course for a 90s game, so whatever. I found the tale told interesting enough that I want to share it here on my channel. So, without further ado, let's gather around and go over the story of Xenogears. So, our tale begins first with a text scroll giving us the backstory of this world we're currently living in. I'm going to go into a bit more detail than the game actually does because, honestly, I find it really interesting, but also because it's going to save me a bit of time later. Right, so there are 3 major powers at work in this world. The first 2 are nations. The Northern Empire of Kislev and the Southern Kingdom of Ave. Ave? Anyways, Kislev is situated in a more grassy, mountainous kind of region, while Ave is right in the middle of a massive arid desert. In any event, these 2 nations have been at war for years. So long, in fact, that the majority of the general public have forgotten the reason why their nations are even at war. Very early on in the war, the fighting was fairly even, but then something happened. I mentioned there were 3 powers in play in this world. Well, the third is a group known as the Ethos, and they are essentially the religion of this world. As such, while they are not a nation or anything, they do hold a lot of sway and power. They are also neutral when it comes to the conflict between Kislev and Ave, meaning they're more than willing to help out both sides. In any event, the Ethos has 3 major goals that it aims to carry out. The first is, of course, the spreading of the word of God. The second is the preservation of the land's culture, and the third is killing zombies. Which is really random, and it actually won't come up until like halfway through the game, but so just keep it in the back of your mind. In any event, the important part here is that preserving of culture, because the Ethos often performs excavations to study the past. And well, over the course of this, they've come across buried ancient weapons. This being a typical fantasy setting, there is of course a super advanced ancient race of people that lived on this planet before us, but they all went extinct thousands of years ago, and no one knows why. In any event, the Ethos, doing its job, managed to restore these ancient weapons and found that they were your typical anime mech, known as a gear. And these gears were far more powerful than any weapon currently being used. A single gear could easily substitute for an entire platoon of soldiers, and the higher-end ones could probably replace an entire army. As such, since the 2 major nations were locked in a stalemate with one another, they quickly demanded the Ethos provide them with these gears, and well, the Ethos was more than happy to oblige, and worked happily away, helping both sides retrofit their armies with these powerful weapons. As such, the face of war changed, and suddenly the power struggle wasn't who had more manpower or anything, but in who was better at excavating and repairing these gears. And in that regard, Kislev had a major edge. There were just more ruins with more gears within their borders, so the tide of war slowly changed in their favor. For years, the battle raged on, but victory kept creeping closer and closer toward the Kislev side. But suddenly, something completely unexpected happened. A group calling itself Gebler appeared with no explanation of where they came from. They were a strange group of people, quite unlike any that walked the land. but their power was undeniable. While they only numbered a small army at most, their technology was absurd. They had access to gears that put both Ave's and Kislev's to shame, far more advanced than any either nation had managed to excavate. And for whatever reason, Gebler offered its services to Ave, giving them some access to the technology and even aiding them in battle. As such, the tide of war flipped almost overnight, and Ave became the dominant force on the land. With Gebler's help, they were able to slowly but surely take back every inch of ground they had lost to Kislev over the previous years. Okay, so that's enough backstory. We now know the basic state of the world we're in. Our story actually begins far away from any of the conflict going on in a small little village known as Lahan. A small but peaceful little haven hidden away in the turmoil of war, living a simple but honest existence. Oh, don't mind that. That's just the doomsday clock that comes standard with all villages like this. Here we meet our protagonist, a young lad by the name of Fei Fongwang. Fei is a kind soul who spends most of his time idling away in the village chief's basement doing his favorite pastime, painting. He's lived in Lahan for the past 3 years, content with the lot he's been given in life. But not everything's perfect. You see, when Fei came to this village 3 years ago, he wasn't actually conscious of it. Apparently, he was brought here one rainy night by a mysterious robed man who, upon his arrival, asked the village elder to take care of Fei. And well, seeing how at the time Fei was beaten, battered, and bloody, the village elder agreed and took him in. Oh my. Oh, the doomsday clock has started moving at triple speed. Well, in any event, Fei, of course, has plot-convenient amnesia and cannot remember a thing before arriving in this village, not even who that robed man was or who he was. But he's not too worried about it. He's happy here. Over the past 3 years, he's managed to make friends and be content with what he has. Speaking of Fei's friends, an important event is coming up in the village. Fei's 2 closest friends, a man named Timothy and a woman named Alice, are to be wed the very next day. So, Fei decides to head over to Alice's place to see if she needs any last-minute help before the big day. Ugh, it's like a troll doll's hair started receding. Anyways, this, child, and not elderly leprechaun like I first suspected, is named Dan, and he's Alice's younger brother. After an awkward conversation with him, you push past him and meet with Alice. And after she drops a couple none-too-subtle hints about how Timothy wasn't her first choice, what can I say? Chicks dig a guy with a body-long ponytail. She asks Fei if he would go to Dr. Sitan's place and grab a camera. Fei agrees and heads off to meet with this Dr. Sitan. It turns out Sitan is a bit of an older guy who lives a little ways outside the village with his wife and daughter. He seems to be quite a wise man who spends most of his days tinkering away with old machines, a hobby of his. However, he is a little on the mysterious side as well. Anyways, Fei makes his way through the forest and arrives at Old Man Sitan's house. There he requests the camera and the doc is more than happy to oblige. He even asks if Fei wants to stay around for a while and have some dinner before heading back, which Fei is also more than happy to oblige. And so, for the rest of the day, Fei spends some time with Dr. Sitan and his family, eating, laughing, and whiling the hours away. Fully fed and with camera in hand, Fei thanks Sitan and begins to make his way back towards the village. When suddenly... the village is under attack. Gears spray bullets wildly, homes burn to the ground, and villagers flee in all directions. Fei and the doc rush into the village, where they quickly bump into Timothy and Alice. They manage to convince the two of them to evacuate, while they head into the city to try and save as many people as they can, particularly Dan, who Alice claims she has been able to find. However, as Fei searches the city, he suddenly notices something. A gear. Hunched over next to him, motionless. A gear that seemingly has no pilot. For some reason, beyond Faye's understanding, he is compelled to climb inside the gear to operate it. Satan sees what he's doing and yells out for him to stop, but it falls on deaf ears. Somehow, Faye's able to pilot the gear perfectly. Now, with some actual firepower at his disposal, he can attempt to drive off this invading force. And at first, it seems to work. Faye is able to dispatch a couple of the grunt gears with relative ease. As he works, we cut back to Satan, who has managed to track down Dan, and he suggests that the two of them escape. By the looks of things, Satan's able to work out that these invading gears are probably after that mech that Faye is currently operating. So, if the villagers get as far away from him as possible, they should be safe. But, just as they turn to leave, Timothy comes rushing back into the village looking for Dan. Faye wakes up in the forest just outside the village. He's confused, unsure what the heck is going on. He remembers he was in his mech trying to protect the village, but then it all goes dark. He looks around a little and notices all the villagers standing just a little ways off. Well, I say all. There does seem to be quite a lot less of them than Faye remembers. Faye asks, where is everyone? Where's the village elder, Timothy, Alice? Satan turns to Faye, but finds it hard to speak. So instead, Dan speaks up, calling Faye a murderer. He was the one who got into that monster machine. When he was inside of it, a blinding white light came out of nowhere and obliterated everything. Everyone, including his sister. With that, Dan runs off, claiming he'll never forgive Faye for what he did. Faye is at a loss. He can't remember what happened, and now he's being accused of murder, of killing his best friends, of ruining the only home he ever knew. But at the same time, he can't deny it. He was the one who got into that mech. Somehow, he must have caused all of this. He looks around the remaining villagers, and all he gets in return are cold, hollow glares. Whatever care these people used to have for him is gone. Faye doesn't have a place here anymore. Satan, acting logically, suggests that it might be in Faye's best interest to leave the village. As painful as it may be, his best chance would probably be to head through the Darkmoon Forest, through the desert, and into the nation of Ave. Those mechs that attacked the village last night were clearly from the Kislev military, so if Faye managed to lay low there, he'd probably be safe. Sadly, though, that's the best bit of advice the doc can give to Faye, so Faye decides to follow it. With a heavy heart, he leaves behind his home of the past 3 years, and heads off into an unfamiliar world. Following the doc's instructions, Faye enters a nearby forest, which will eventually lead into Ave's desert climate. It's a pretty dense maze of trees, and contains more than a few small monsters. However, Faye is more than capable of defending himself, and slowly makes his way through. As he pushes through, trampling over different branches and stumps, suddenly...
Vanahos! Katinayu tat badaintuna akva. Valna rantak. Brana kalti. Throw down your weapon. Make one wrong move and I'll shoot.
It's a beautiful lady, brandishing a gun. Judging from the unfamiliar language she opened up with, she's probably not from around here. Whatever the case, it's pretty apparent she's not too used to holding a firearm. She orders Faye to turn around, which Faye silently obliges, then demands Faye tell her how to escape this forest. Faye sadly shakes his head. He doesn't know the way out either. He's searching for it too. The lady looks down silently and slightly lowers her weapon, clearly unsure how to proceed. So Faye takes a step forward and asks whether she's gonna shoot him or not. The woman looks confused, but Faye continues. I'm someone who's completely worthless. If you're gonna kill me, would you just get it over with already? Faye takes a few steps towards the woman and she raises her gun back and orders him to stand down. She fires a shot, but it flies harmlessly past Faye. Come on, what are you even aiming at? You'll never kill me like that. The woman recoils, unable to understand what she's dealing with here, unsure of what to do. Why is someone so willing to throw their own life away? As she slowly backs away, suddenly, from high in the forest canopy, a figure lands behind her. A strange monster of sorts, yet another denizen of this forest. It catches the lady by surprise and knocks her unconscious. Faye, just as surprised as the woman, jumps forward and yells, "Keep your hands off Ellie." With a couple of quick blows from Faye's martial arts, he's able to down the weird creature without too much trouble, before quickly turning back to tend to the wounded lady. We cut to later that night, when the mysterious woman finally regains consciousness. Faye greets her and states that he doesn't really mind if she still wants to kill him, but it would probably be better if she waited till they got out of the woods. Maybe they should work together until then. The woman remains silent, clearly still suspicious of Faye, but eventually agrees with him that working together to escape is the best option at this point. However, she's not really comfortable hanging around a dirty, surface-dwelling lamb like him. Faye isn't really sure what this whole lamb business is, but he's not the type to ask questions. Oh, and get used to him not asking questions, by the way, because he won't be asking them for a frustratingly long period of time. Anyways, he gives her his name and asks for hers in return, and after a brief pause, she responds. She is known as Elhiam. I am sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, but most people just call her Ellie. Faye pauses for a moment, realizing he already knew that, but why did he already know that? Well, whatever. For now, it's late and the two decide to go get some shut-eye before looking for a way out the next day. That night, Faye has a dream. A desert, a procession, a nun with beautiful long red hair. Eventually, the next day comes, and the two of you begin to make progress through the forest once again. And before you know it, you're most of the way through. As you're nearing the exit, Ellie pauses and asks Faye, why did he say his life was worthless yesterday? Why is he so ready to throw it all away? Faye pauses for a moment before telling her about everything that happened. The attack on his village, his piloting the mech, losing control, and the subsequent deaths of his many, many friends. As Faye recalls his story, he starts to blame the mechs that appeared in the village. If they hadn't come, they wouldn't have started fighting. Then Faye wouldn't have entered that mech, he wouldn't have gone berserk, and none of this would have happened. It's their fault that Lahan is ruined. It's their fault that Timothy and Alice are dead. But Ellie interrupts him. Are you serious right now? You're gonna throw all that blame at their feet? You're just as much to blame as they are. You're the one who destroyed the village, right? But instead, you're just going to claim that none of it is your fault? It's clear that Kislev was just trying to get that gear. If you hadn't interfered, they probably would have just destroyed the homes and spared the villagers. How can you even pilot that gear? Why would you do it? It takes years of training to pilot one of those things. Civilians should have no ability to control such a machine. You should have just sat back and helped evacuate the village. But you're the one who decided to step in and try and fight. Responsibility lies with you, too. At Ellie's words, Faye puts his hands over his head and slowly crumples into a ball on the ground. Her words pierce through him more effectively than any bullet could, probably because he knows it's true. Ellie's expression softens all of a sudden, realizing that perhaps she was being too harsh. She tries to say something, but Faye yells at her to shut up. How could she possibly know what he's been through? The pain he felt, the sight of all that blood, the weight of the people's lives on his hands. He lost everything he cared about. How could she possibly understand that? Ellie, unsure what to say, slowly turns and makes for the exit by herself. As she walks, we flash back to a part of her past. A time when she caused the deaths of many people. A time when she cried out that it wasn't her fault. Don't blame her for what happened. She couldn't control it. A time when she felt absolutely powerless. Yes, it seems like, in fact, Ellie might be the only person who can understand what Faye is going through. But, as she reminisces about her past, the ground starts to shake. Back at Faye's location, still clutching his head in his hands, Ellie's shriek of terror rings out. Faye jumps to his feet and rushes to her location to find this towering monstrosity standing over her body.
I am Reptar!
Faye enters combat with the beastie, but it's so damn big that his punches aren't really doing much of anything. If he sticks around, then Faye will become little more than a tasty treat for the beast, but he can't just leave Ellie behind. And that's when a familiar voice calls out to him. Faye looks up and finds that it's old Doc Sitan, and he's brought the gear with him. Quickly, he drops it close enough for Faye to get in and tells him to use it to drive off the monster. Faye is hesitant to re-enter the thing, scared he may go berserk again, but seeing Ellie next to the monster's feet, he knows he has no choice. With a quick hop, he's back in the cockpit, and it doesn't take long for him to bring down the mighty dinosaur. With it gone, you reunite with the Doc before turning to tend to Ellie. Once again, she appears to be relatively unharmed, and regains consciousness rather quickly this time. After some introductions, a lot of you decide to make camp for the night, and Sitan takes the time to repair your gear. Which, after some study, Sitan finds out is named the Weltall. Anyways, that night, while Faye sleeps, Ellie and Sitan have a little talk. The Doc talks about the night the village was attacked, and how, when he was investigating the aftermath the next day, he came across an abandoned mech on the outskirts of the village. Then, in the same language Ellie had initially used when she met Faye, he asks, "It's yours, isn't it?" Ellie is shocked, but after a minute, nods. It appears like she had been part of a force of gears that were trying to make off with this Weltall mech. But they were suddenly attacked by Kislev forces and forced to make a crash landing near Lahan village. That's right, Ellie is part of the reason why those gears attacked Lahan. Fortunately, it looks like Faye never figured out what Ellie's true identity was, but Sitan is pretty quick on the uptake, so he managed to figure out she was probably with the force that was attacked. In any event, Sitan asks Ellie leave here right now. There's a road not too far from here out of the forest, and if she follows it, she can get back to her home, reconnect with the army she's a part of, and return to her old life. Ellie pauses for a moment, then says something. She wants to apologize to Faye. She said something truly horrible to him. She called him a coward for throwing the blame on others rather than accepting it for himself. But in reality, she was just trying to do that very same thing, push the blame from herself onto someone else. She had been the one who crash-landed in the village. She was the one who caused the fight to break out. She was the reason Faye needed to enter that gear and defend Lahan. Hearing Faye throw all that blame towards her had caused her to lash out and try and make Faye take some of the blame himself. And, well, she's sorry. She hates that that's the first reaction she had. In any event, Sitan thanks her, pleasantly surprised at how considerate she turned out to be, but says he'll make sure Faye knows how she feels. That being said, she should really return to her own country for now. So, Ellie, silently, takes her leave. The next day, Faye reveals that he had been awake for a good part of the conversation Doc and Ellie had had. He says that he doesn't blame her at all. In fact, he too would like to apologize to her for taking out his anger on her. He wants to take her words to heart. He has to accept at least some of the responsibility for what happened to the village. Man, that shit took Luke like 2/3 of the damn game to figure out. Good on you, Faye. Anyways, Sitan reveals that he has plans on traveling with you for a while. He's worried about you and wants to help keep you safe. But unfortunately, the Weltall is rather banged up and will require some new parts to continue operating. So, the two of you decide to continue on the route you were originally on and head into Avad territory in the hopes of being able to buy the parts necessary for its repair. Faye, of course, does not want anything to do with the damn thing anymore. He never wants to fly another gear again. But he agrees with the doc that both Gebler and Kislev will probably send more troops to try and retrieve the Weltall. They were fighting over it last night, after all. And if they send more, it will cause even more destruction around Lahan. So, at the very least, Faye wants to help get the Weltall as far away from Lahan as he can. You make it to a small village inside of Ed territory and look around to see if you can buy some parts. You also grab some rest, restock on supplies, and oh, hey, it's Big Joe. Unfortunately, though, none of the shops in the town are selling any of the parts you need, so Satan gets the bright idea to scavenge for the parts. The desert wastes are littered with ruins, and quite often the Kislev and Eve armies will engage in small skirmishes over them. Scouring the wrecks of some of these destroyed gears would probably be the best way to find the parts the Weltall needs. However, the doc decides he wants to go alone, and orders Faye stay behind while he goes and grabs the parts. Faye complies for a while, but after some time hears someone talk about pirates wandering the desert, and decides that he's worried about Satan and he should go look for him. So Faye heads off after the doc and treks into the depths of the desert. For a barren wasteland of sand, it's surprisingly lively, as Faye spies several Eveg gears patrolling the area. He also bears witness to a,
Just a flying saucer.
well, that's odd, but you know Faye's motto, don't ask questions. So Faye continues his search for the doc, and eventually night falls. Unfortunately for him, this is also where his luck runs out, as one of the passing Eve patrols finally notices him, and 2 gears bear down on Faye. But wouldn't you know it, he gets saved by Satan again. Don't expect that trend to get old anytime soon, by the way. It looks like you somehow managed to completely miss him, and he's gone off and fixed the Weltall on his own. But whatever, Faye's incompetence aside, Doc hands over the Weltall to you, and you quickly deal with the Eve grunts. They're old clunkers, no match for the Weltall's superior tech. Faye lets out a sigh of relief as the enemy gears fall, but this moment of reprieve is cut short by a cruel laugh. Faye looks up and sees an imposing gear standing above him. On its shoulder stands this Darth Vader-looking mamma-jamma, and once again, Faye feels this feeling of deja vu.
Who are you? Who? Right. I know you. You killed her. Her? No. It wasn't. Not me. You coward. It was you.
Wait, no, that's right. This guy. He was at the village. He was the one who ordered the death of Timothy. The man introduces himself as Graf, and he seems to know exactly who Faye is. He claims he attacked the village to awaken the latent power within Faye, the grief and torment he would feel as the villagers perish. They would be the catalyst to awaken the unfathomable potential trapped within Faye. Don't you just crave destruction? With your power, I can finally destroy God, just like I destroyed your father. Graf then summons a beast from the ground and orders it to attack Faye. He claims he will continue to throw obstacles in his way, continue to force Faye to destroy everything in front of him, until at last Graf has the power he desires. With that, he flies off, leaving Faye to fight. Faye, having no other option, is forced to destroy the giant, it kind of looks like a doggy chew toy. Well, whatever, it's not too difficult of a struggle, and Faye is able to destroy it. But his worries are not at an end, because it seems like all this commotion has caught the attention of the Avem military. A much larger force than the small scouting parties Faye has dealt with appears before them. And at this point, the Weltall is badly dinged up, and there's no way in heck they're going to be able to defeat them. So, Faye and the Doc are left with only one option: surrender. And the 2 of them are brought into Eve custody. Aboard the Eve prison ship, Faye is silent for a long time. The words that Graf bastard said echo through his head over and over. He can't shake the feeling that he's met him before. Is this man really going to keep chasing him? Keep him from ever finding a peaceful life? Well, whatever the case, there's little you can do. You're locked away and your gear is currently being hauled into the Ave military complex. Well, lucky for you, you don't have to do shit, because the prison ship you're riding is suddenly attacked by those pirates you heard about. Yes, and they have a sand submarine. Anyways, using the chaos caused by the attack, you and Citan are quickly able to break out of your holding cell and make your way up to the ship's deck. There, you're able to scramble your way over to the Weltall, open the cockpit, and get it operational. With it, escape becomes a much easier prospect, and the two of you quickly abandon ship. However, while you've successfully escaped the Ava military, there's still those pesky pirates hanging around. A trio of red gears stand before you and orders you to take responsibility. Who just abandons their own crew to sink like that? It seems like this man has mistaken you for part of the Ava military. You try to explain your situation to him, but the pirate doesn't take no for an answer and calls you a coward for trying such yellow-bellied tactics to survive. Have at ye! An epic fight ensues, back and forth, but as you do, the sand beneath you suddenly gives way. Your fight with the heavy mechs disturbed the ground so much that it caused a cave-in, and you wind up in a network of caverns that lay below the desert. Fortunately, both of your mechs are relatively unharmed from the fall, and the two of you get out and finally talk face to face. The pirate accosts you for a minute before realizing that your claims were true. You really aren't a member of the Ave military. The man apologizes and introduces himself. This is Bartholomew, but everyone just calls him Bart. Whatever circumstances brought the two of you here, it's clear that you aren't exactly enemies or anything, so you both decide to work together until you can escape this network of caves. You run around and fight a whole bunch of monsters, get some aid from a crusty old hermit that happens to live down here, and fight a boss that, quite honestly, comes right the fuck out of nowhere. Anyways, with Bart's help, the two of you are eventually able to find an exit from the caverns and reunite with his crew, aboard that submarine you saw before. It is known as the Yggdrasil. There, you are introduced to Bart's crew, as well as reunited with Citan, who was luckily taken in by the pirates. The other people you meet are Bart's right and left-hand man, an eye-patched fellow named Sigurd, a stern but very polite man, and Old Man Mason, an easily flustered butler. And surprisingly, it seems like Citan and Sigurd seem to know each other somehow. That sure could be interesting if Faye was the kind of guy who asked questions. Oh well. Anyways, the two of you, finally safe, and together with the Weltall, figure you might as well stay with the pirates until they arrive at their hideout. So you stick around for a while, get some refreshment, and learn a little bit about these pirates. You see, Bart's full name is actually Bartholomew Fatima. Yes, that's right. That Fatima. Okay, I'm just kidding. So it turns out Ave has been under the rule of a man named SINKIN for the past decade or so, but before that it was ruled by a dynasty of kings known as the Fatimas. However, the last son of the Fatima line was publicly declared dead of illness many years ago. But it seems like that was false, and in fact, Bart is that young princeling, the true heir to the throne of Ave. Hence, why the right and left-hand man of this pirate crew are a proper gentleman and your stereotypical butler. Anyways, this whole pirate crew are all just members loyal to the Fatima line and would love to see Bart reinstated on the throne. But, unfortunately, they can't really do that at the moment. Apparently, that current ruler of Ave SINKIN has one of Bart's cousins held prisoner, a young lady by the name of Marguerite, though everyone calls her Margie. Man, there are a lot of nicknames in this game. Faye should thank his lucky stars he was born with a one-syllable name. Anyways, SINKIN apparently captured Margie in order to find a legendary treasure known as the Fatima Jasper, a relic whose location is unknown to anyone outside the Fatima bloodline. Anyways, as you're learning about this, Bart, the man himself, comes up to you and asks if you'd be willing to help him in rescuing his cousin. Citan agrees that he wouldn't mind helping. After all, the pirates did save him from Ave, so it'd be a good way to pay them back. But he turns to Faye to see what he thinks. And Faye is less enthusiastic about helping. Once again, people are asking him to get into his gear and fight. Once again, more people are after his power. What if he snaps this time? What if he goes berserk again and ends even more innocent lives? Why can't he just live an ordinary life away from this violence, away from the hurt and the pain? Can't you see he doesn't want any of this? Hearing that, Bart pauses before responding. He heard about the whole event in Lahan, but would it really have been better if he hadn't gotten in the gear? Sure, in the end, it was you who went berserk, and sure, I know that it must eat you up inside. But people still would have died if he hadn't gotten in. People will keep coming up with reasons to fight, but those reasons are the very thing Bart wants to eliminate. And well, if Bart had Faye's kind of power, he wouldn't stop until all those reasons had finally vanished. His piece said, Bart says he won't blame Faye if he wants to leave. Just think over what he wants to do with his life. And with that, he walks off, leaving Faye to mull over his own feelings. In any case, some time passes and night falls. But as everyone lays asleep in their beds, something stirs. The alarm rings out in the facility. A highly advanced group of Gebler mechs manage to infiltrate the pirate compound. Bart and his crew quickly scramble to intercept the invaders, and Satan even borrows an old gear from the pirate's hangar and takes on a few of the Gebler forces himself. Still, there's a lot of them, and Bart and Satan can only cover so much ground. A pair of children trying to escape the commotion gets cornered by one of the Gebler mechs, and advances on them, ready to wipe out their meager existence. But, of course, Faye comes in at the last moment. Looks like Bart's words managed to penetrate his thick skull, and Faye realizes that while it's okay to avoid fighting, sometimes it is in fact necessary. With Faye's help, the three of you are quickly able to clean up the Gebler squad and send them retreating into the night. The commotion dying down, a lot of you regroup, and Faye gives a little speech. He says that while he does want to avoid violence, all he's actually been doing at this point is running away and trying to hide. Right now, he needs to find a path of his own, a purpose in life to follow. He doesn't know exactly what that is, but he wants to find it, just like Bart did. And for now, why not let that path be helping Bart rescue his cousin? Satan and the rest of the pirate crew are all rather happy to have Faye aboard, and after a bit of repair to the base and the gears, you all make your way towards the capital of Ave, where Margie is being held captive. However, you don't exactly have the firepower at your disposal to just assault an entire city. That's exactly the reason why Bart has taken to piracy rather than just invading his old home. So instead, Faye, Satan, and Bart all infiltrate the city on foot. And after a whole bunch of deliberation, you figure out a way to sneak into the palace and rescue Margie. You see, there just so happens to be a martial arts tournament going on in the city, a grand event that will have all eyes on the city firmly on it. Your plan involves having Faye enter the tournament and drag it on for as long as you possibly can, while Bart sneaks into the palace via the aqueduct. And so, you get to take part in two separate storylines. On Faye's side, Faye is thrust into some grueling battles. He drives off a terrifying caveman with a club, a strange boy with a bag full of insidious potions. Wait, I thought this was a martial arts tournament. How do potions count as martial arts? Oh, hey, Big Joe. Meanwhile, Bart swims. Slowly. On the other side, Faye is faced with a surprise opponent. It's Dan, who claims he's come to take vengeance for his sister. Look, I'm not gonna fight a kid. Maybe I'll just let him take a little bit of his anger out, and then, I don't know, I'll drop him out of the ring or something. Wait, what are you doing? What's that light? What? What the fuck? Wait, hold on a minute here. If you could cast freaking Hadokens from your hands, why didn't you step in to save the village? God damn it, and children do not have widow's peaks! Anyways, eventually, Dan gets sick of you not fighting back and runs off. Meanwhile, Bart finally gets out of the damn water and makes his way through the palace, finding it's mostly empty, save for a few guards. Back on Faye's side, Faye manages to reach the finals of the tournament, where he's put face to face with a strange masked individual. He seems to know Faye's name, even though Faye never gave it, and refers to himself as Wiseman. Faye tries a few of his moves on the guy, but none of them seem to connect. The man moves at speeds no ordinary human should. No matter what Faye does, he just can't land a blow. The man speaks cryptically with Faye for a bit, questioning him about his reason for fighting and calling him immature. Faye tries to get the guy to fight seriously, but he refuses, and in fact, ends up resigning from the fight altogether after he says a couple pieces, never once raising his hand against Faye. The audience is just as stunned as Faye, but, by forfeit, Faye is the champion? Anyways, back to Bart, who's made it all the way through the palace, and finally manages to make it to Margie's room. The young Margie jumps to her feet when Bart bursts the door and runs to his side, relieved to see her cousin once more. Bart comforts her and tells her that they're finally getting out of this dump. Together, the two of them make to leave, but before they do, Margie makes a point of taking a strange little pink doll with her. Okay. Well, all that's left is the matter of sneaking out of this palace. The two of them tiptoe out of Margie's holding room, but unfortunately, just as they round the corner, a door opens and two figures walk out into the same hallway. From their uniforms, it's clear they're not Ave soldiers. No, they must be part of the Gebler troops working with the Ave army. Well, in fact, it turns out that this is Ramses, the commanding officer of the Gebler forces stationed here, and his right-hand man, a blue-haired woman named Myung, two exceedingly influential people. The two are surprised to see Bart and Margie, but seem to quickly grasp what's going on. The man Ramses pulls out an impressive-looking sword and orders that Margie return to her room. As Bart pulls out his whip in kind, the woman Myung steps in. She claims she knows that he is Prince Bartholomew. While Gebler is working with Ave, they really don't care that much who's actually in charge. Gebler itself has no real attachment to SINKIN. They'd be fine with either Bart or him. But Bart refuses her offer. He would never side with someone who was fine either way. And so a fight ensues between Ramses and Bart, with Margie and Myung providing support, I guess. It drags on for a while, but Ramses has a slight upper hand. Still, Bart is able to hold his own, when suddenly, who should appear but Faye? With a quick punch and a kick, he knocks back Ramses, landing at Bart's side to help. However, this is where things get a little bit flipped, as for once, someone seems to recognize Faye, but Faye has no idea who they are. Yes, for some reason, Ramses is stunned for a moment by Faye's technique. He recognizes it. Apparently, it's almost identical to some red-haired guy he had a bit of a hate boner for. Anyways, he stares silently at Faye for a few moments before regaining his composure. His vigor renewed, he once again turns on your group. But with Faye joining in, the two of you are able to overpower Ramses. With Ramses knocked back, the three of you take your chance to escape and rush towards a nearby elevator. You did it. You escaped with Margie.
Run through the cold of the night.
Wait, no you didn't. You still have to get out of this damn city, and you were in such a rush that you're not exactly sure where this elevator leads. After a long ride down, it comes out at some sort of facility that must have been under the palace. Apparently, it didn't used to be here back when Bart was still a child. Well, whatever this place is, you can't just stick around, so you rush forward blindly, take a turn, and bump into... Yes, it looks like we are in a giant facility Gebler set up underneath the Ave Palace. And Ellie had returned here after escaping the forest. Bart confronts Ellie, seeing her as nothing more than a Gebler dog, but Faye calms him down, claiming that she's a friend of his. Bart is unsure what to think of that, but you don't really have time to think because out of the elevator you just came down appears a contingent of guards, presumably looking for you. Before you can say anything, Ellie grabs a lot of you and drags you into her office. You listen quietly as the guards march by. You turn to Ellie and she explains that, yes, she's been a soldier of Gebler this entire time, sent to retrieve a special mech from Kislev, only to be shot down over Lahan. And so, Faye and Ellie take a moment to finally apologize to one another like they both wanted to. She's sorry for causing the tragedy in his village, and he's sorry for lashing out at her and now knows that it's not really her fault. After that, he explains why he's here and who Bart is. After hearing it all, Ellie decides to help you. For now. It's not much, but she can get you out of the castle undetected. Bart is hesitant in receiving aid from a Gebler soldier, an officer for that matter, but Faye insists they can trust her and it's not like they have any other options. So, begrudgingly, he follows along. She brings the lot of you to the gear launch bay at the back of the Gebler compound. By launching out with a mech, they could quickly escape the city, make it back to their ship, and start making tracks back to the pirates' hideout. But before they go, Faye turns to Ellie and asks her to come with him. He tries to convince her that she doesn't belong here, that she could escape it all and come with him. But Ellie sadly shakes her head. She's a soldier. This is her home. Well, she does, in a way, want to help Faye for all that he did. When next they meet, if Faye continues to work with Bart, they will be enemies. With her piece said, she runs off, leaving Faye, Bart, and Margie the opportunity to launch off and escape. And after that sad goodbye, they're able to break free of the city and make it back to the Yggdrasil. Margie reunites with Bart's crew, who are all overjoyed to see her once more. Plans are immediately made to return Margie to her home, a small town known as Nissan, a town where a small sect of the Ethos religion exists, and Margie is known as its Holy Mother. She got this title because her mother was the previous Holy Mother, but then she got executed, so now Margie is the Holy Mother. Whatever, it's not really that important. Anyways, that's your next destination. Along the way, you find out that weird doll Margie was carrying with her was actually, alive. And can talk. And is named Choo Choo. And is in love with Faye. Okay. Huh. Right, let's just move on from that. So, you head off to Nissan to deliver Margie back to her home. Once there, you spend some time looking around the place. Bart visits some old acquaintances from his childhood, you listen to the nuns at Margie's church sing some hymns, and you admire a painting of the original Holy Mother. She kinda looks like Ellie. And Satan points out that the painting style seems strikingly familiar to the one Faye used back in Lahan. Well, I'm sure you know we don't need to question that. For now, Bart has a question for his right-hand man, Sigurd, about why exactly is it that Sigurd and Satan seem to know each other? Right, so let's stop here for a moment, because we've got to talk about the world once more. I've been avoiding talking about this so far because there's never actually been much explanation up until this point, but there's been a whole lot of foreshadowing that I've been avoiding. Okay, so you remember how I said that Gebler came kind of out of nowhere and started helping Ave in the war effort? Well, it turns out they're actually the army of a nation known as Solaris. Now, Solaris is odd in that it does not appear on any maps and nobody is quite sure where it actually is, but it most definitely exists. The people of Solaris think of themselves as superior beings, the chosen race who were gifted the world to do with as they please. They call themselves the shepherds, and all other races, the filthy commoners that they are, they call the lambs. That's why Ellie spoke in a weird language when you first met her, and why she called Faye a lamb. She's a Solarian. Solaris is run by an emperor, who's not going to be important at all for a very long time, so just, I guess, keep a mental note of him, and this giant floating ball. This thing is actually a supercomputer that stores the ancient consciousnesses of the founding members of the Solarian Empire. They also aren't going to be very important for a long time, but the game keeps cutting to them every once in a while so they can give these, vague, threatening speeches to each other. Honestly, even after having beaten the game, it's still pretty hard to follow what the heck they're talking about half the time. In any case, just know that they exist as well. Anyways, the important part here is Solaris. While being far and away the most technologically advanced race on the planet, it is also rather small. The number of people with pure Solarian blood is basically negligible. And well, you can't run a nation on your love of eugenics alone, so Solaris takes to kidnapping surface dwellers and forcing them into labor camps where they act as the little cogs that keep Solaris running. So, it turns out that Satan and Sigurd were both in Solaris, and both decided to escape from the horrible place. It looks like Sigurd was unfortunate enough to get abducted while he was a child and forced to work for Solaris for most of his life. Satan, on the other hand, it seems was an actual citizen of Solaris, but left in a similar manner to Sigurd because he was disgusted with how his nation treated the lesser races. They also revealed that they were quite close with that Ramses fellow, the head of the Gebler forces. It seems he was kind of instrumental in their escape, and he's really the reason why they know each other. Apparently, Ramses was also a lower-level Solarian, like Citan, containing some Solarian blood, but not being pure like the nation would love. But his skill was unparalleled, and after graduating the military training school in Solaris, he quickly rose to the ranks and ended up becoming the head commander of the forces at an unbelievable rate. Being of a lower class, he believed not in blood or heritage, but in skill. It didn't matter if you were a Solarian or a surface dweller, if you had the skill to perform the task he needed, then Ramses would hire you. At the time, Sigurd and Citan saw him as a sort of beacon of hope, the one person capable of changing the corrupt ways of Solaris. But over time, they came to see that merit was literally all he cared about, and decided their only option was just to escape Solaris altogether. Finally, they also mentioned that Solaris has been testing a particular drug known as Drive, a drug that causes its user to gain super heightened reflexes and processing power at the cost of their humanity, losing any sort of emotion or empathy, also probably deteriorating their long-term physical health. Basically, the drug to create the perfect soldier at the cost of human life, blah blah blah, evil, generic race stuff. So yeah, Solaris, they're kinda like the Nazis, but kind of worse. Trust me, it gets worse. Anyways, now that Doc and Sigurd have finally finished their long exposition dump, it's time to get back on track. Now that Sakan has lost his only bargaining chip in having Margie as a hostage, it's time to take back what is rightfully Bart's. So you all come up with a plan on how to besiege the capital of Ave and take down Sakan. After a lot of talking, you settle on this. Faye will head up a small contingent of gears and head to the border between Ave and Kislev. There, he will do a small raid on a large army stationed there. This should, hopefully, cause the Gebler forces stationed in the capital to move south to back up their allies. Meanwhile, Bark, Citan, and the Yggdrasil will sneak into the now undefended capital and, if all works out, take out that filthy snake, Sakan. With all your battle orders ready, you all take off for the night to rest up and have a few character moments. Sigurd and Bart have a bit of a bro moment. Margie and one of her fellow nuns talk about,
What are you talking about, Shelbyville? Why would we want to marry our cousins?
Because they're so attractive. I thought that was the whole point of this journey.
Absolutely not.
We also get a bit of a scene from elsewhere, where we find out that Ramses, anyways, it seems that Ramses keeps dreaming about this red-haired man. He's obsessed with him. We also see that, Myung knows Graf. Huh. Well, whatever, the next day comes and Faye makes to start his side of the mission. But before he does, Bart stops him and wishes him luck. Bart also asks that if anything should happen to him, would Faye please look after Margie for him. Faye tells him not to jinx it, everything will work out fine, but yeah, if worse comes to worse, he will look out for her. And so, the Weltall and Yggdrasil set off on different paths on the road to retaking Ave. On Faye's side of things, after a day's journey across the desert, they arrive close to their destination. A small group of mechs, with Faye in the lead, decide to scale a small mountainside to get to the optimal position to ambush the Ave military. But, as you're climbing, you find someone waiting for you. It's a force of Gebler Gears. In fact, it's the same Gebler Gears who attacked Bart's hideout a ways back. They outnumber Faye's group, but Faye's gotten a lot better at controlling the Weltall at this point. And so, despite their persistent attacks, Faye is able to drive them off with relative ease. However, they seem to have added an extra gear to their arsenal. Last gear, the one presumably leading this entire operation, engages with Faye, and a familiar voice crackles over Faye's intercom. That's right, it's Ellie. And from her appearance and tone of voice, Faye's able to guess that she's probably using that drug Sigurd and Citan were talking about, the super soldier drug that dampens your emotions and raises your prowess. Faye tries to reason with her, but Ellie's having none of it, and she lets fly a salvo of laser blasts. Faye is forced to defend himself, all the while trying to speak to Ellie's voice of reason, but the drug seemingly has suppressed that part of her. After a long, intense trading of blows, eventually Faye drops to his knees, and Ellie moves in for the kill. But before she can, she stops. She begins to freak out, grips her head, pain searing through every part of her body. Is it a side effect of the drugs? Seeing his opportunity, Faye charges her and pins her gear to the ground. Again, he begs her to stop this, that they don't need to fight like this. Ellie struggles, retorting in the same cruel manner as before, but every once in a while seems to notice just how off her words are. The drug appears to be wearing off. Faye keeps her pinned in place while her gear struggles in vain to break free, until at last, she lets out a long scream, and her gear falls to the ground, motionless. Faye jumps out of the Weltall and drags Ellie out of her cockpit. The two have a short conversation together. Faye asks, why would she use this drug? Why would she sacrifice her own humanity for a fight like this? And Ellie claims she didn't want to. She hates what it does to her, but she felt like it was the only option. So, Faye talks to her. He knows what she's going through. He's realized that the two of them share a similar burden. Ellie nods in agreement. They probably do. He asks her once more to join him, but Ellie claims once more that she can't just abandon her homeland. So instead, Faye takes a different route and simply asks, would you consider just leaving the army? It feels like the life of a soldier just doesn't suit her. With that said, the two silently part ways. Meanwhile, on Bart's side of things, they begin their operation of infiltrating the FA Palace. It seems like everything's going exactly to plan. The number of troops surrounding the city is noticeably diminished, and Bart and his small crew manage to make it inside with no conflict. However, upon emerging in the center of the palace, you find an ambush waiting for you, led by both Sakan and that strange blue-haired lady, Myong. Sigurd and Citan try to reason with her. I guess they worked together back when they were part of Solaris. But Myong simply scoffs at their failed infiltration attempt and casually struts off, leaving Sakan to clean up the mess on his hands. Things are looking bleak for our friends. Surrounded with no means of escape, their chances of survival look slim.
That's 100 feet in the air! Is that who we think it is? It's touchdown! There's only one!
Yes, it's Old Man Mason. I guess Sakan's guards are just stunned stupid at the awesomeness they're currently witnessing. Well, whatever. Thanks to that, Bart is able to escape. But their troubles aren't over. Obviously, Ramses was able to see through their plan and had contingencies in place. So that probably means Faye is going to be in a bit of trouble as well. But they can't really think on that right now because there is a full contingent of Gebler forces now bearing down on the Yggdrasil, so a lot of them are forced into a full-scale retreat. Meanwhile, we cut back to Faye as he begins what is the actual operation, assaulting the Aveh forces. And honestly, it goes amazingly well. Faye and his crew are able to break through enemy lines, destroy a number of gears, and even take out the enemy command ship. Honestly, things couldn't have gone better until... Yes, it's that mysterious figure, Graf, once again trying to interfere with Faye's life. He flies up to the enemy commander and with a wave of his arms seems to pass some sort of energy into him. The enemy commander's dilapidated mech seems to revive, fully renewed. It's immediately apparent that the thing is much more powerful than it was a few moments ago. Faye gets ready to face it, but he's stopped by the members of Bart's crew. They shout to Faye that he needs to get back to the Yggdrasil and tell Bart everything that's happened. They'll cover his retreat while he makes an escape. With that, the lot of them charge towards the enemy ship. But with whatever this power is that Graf gave to it, they don't stand a chance. One by one, Faye's companions are obliterated before his eyes. Faye starts to hear the blood pumping in his ears. He watches, powerless, as once again, people are killed before his very eyes. A familiar sensation begins to well up within him. We return to the Yggdrasil, engaged in a high-speed chase. The forces of Gebler are bearing down upon it, pelting it with high-powered torpedoes and gunfire. If they keep this up, then the Yggdrasil won't be able to last much longer. Bart decides that the only course of action is to fight. Things are looking bleak, they're outnumbered 100 to 1, but if they don't stand and fight here, they'll just be leading the forces back to Nissan. He suits up in his gear and gets ready to give Gebler everything he's got. When suddenly, a strange red gear appears seemingly out of nowhere and begins to single-handedly, utterly destroy the Gebler army. With a flurry of quick and precise movements, half the enemy fleet is rendered completely inoperational in a matter of moments. Both sides stop, neither knowing what the heck is going on. But Ramses seems to recognize the gear. It's the one he's been looking for all this time. The one piloted by that red-haired man he hates so much. In a flash, he rushes off and makes to take off in his very own gear, Myung pausing to chuckle lightly under her breath before following suit. Meanwhile, the gear finds its way to Bart. It moves so fast that Bart was able to barely keep up with it, but now it's suddenly next to him, menacing. The pilot asks Bart, "Are you strong?" Bart, still completely confused, can't offer much of a reply and tries to ask who he is. But the enemy mech just asks again. I asked, "Are you strong?" As the two stare each other down, the gears of Ramses and Myung appear behind them. Ramses immediately challenges the new mech to a showdown. On his honor, he will finally destroy him, pay him back for what he did. And the red gear promptly obliterates Ramses in a matter of moments. With a single blow, he removes one of his gear's arms, then proceeds to toss it around like a rag doll in a washing machine. Ramses tries to stand his ground, but frankly, at this point, he's fighting with less than half a gear. It's all he can do to stay conscious. Red Mech, seeing no more of a fight, turns to face down Bart once more. And Myung, seeing her opportunity, quickly scoops up the shattered remains of her commander and flies off. Bart tries his best against the Red Menace, but finds himself equally outmatched. It only takes one blow to render his gear inoperational. But what he is able to do, buy time. Because while all this has been going on, the Yggdrasil has been on the move. Sigurd has sent out the orders to bring it up to its maximum possible velocity. And so, as the red gear stands triumphantly over Bart's broken mech, he turns to see a submarine flying right at his face. Bam! In an instant, the entire weight of the Yggdrasil comes crashing down on top of the red gear, smooshing him like a bug. The day is saved. Sigurd and Bart have a hearty laugh. I mean, going at that speed has basically ruined the Yggdrasil, but at least they're safe. Until, somehow, seemingly in defiance of all laws of physics, the Yggdrasil begins to rise out of the sand. Higher and higher, the Yggdrasil is carried into the air, until at last it's revealed that the mysterious red mech is completely unharmed. The pilot gives some condescending admiration to the Yggdrasil's ingenuity, before offering Bart back the same gift he just received. On board the Yggdrasil, Sigurd turns to Citan and orders that he escapes. The ship is coming apart at the seams. If worst comes to worst, the engine could explode and wipe out everyone on board. Citan, being an outsider, should leave now. The doc tries to argue, but Sigurd quickly manages to convince him, and he's launched out of the Yggdrasil in his gear. Forced to escape, Citan wanders the desert in the hopes of finding Faye. As he does, he comes across an utterly devastated mech. It's that one mech Graf gave unnatural powers to. The one Faye had been fighting.